Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, I have the honor to say some words to close this meeting. But first, I want to ask you what's the outcome of the workshop? Can anybody give some answers about the 2 questions or 3 questions we asked?
Well, we didn't do this in the workshop, but that's because we were sidetracked with a lot of talking about side issues and I didn't get a chance to put it in. So here it is. Why is it so little noticeable in the world? And my answer is fear.
Fear.
That one of the common, perhaps the most common way that a person reacts in a lot of places, maybe most places, not every place, you can't say a thing like that. They see a person suffering or in poverty. Their first reaction could be they're afraid that this could happen to them. And then they immediately start becoming defensive and trying to figure out, gee, if this can happen to a human being, it could happen to me. And they spend the rest of their lives, perhaps, trying to figure out ways to prevent that from happening to them, and that leads to greed. And once a person gets on that track, they're more or less permanently closed to compassion, except maybe they'll donate $1 million now and then to some charity if they get a tax write-off.
I think that's correct.
Or their name on a plaque.
And to which part of the human consciousness, the composite human consciousness, belongs fear? Can you answer that question? To which part of the human consciousness belongs fear? The higher or the lower part?
It's really the animal part of man.
I think so, yeah.
The most animalistic part of human nature
so we know
is
how
to react to something strange, unexpected, surprising with fear. I mean, a lot of people do this even when the fear is not justified just because they weren't expecting something to happen.
Well, I think that's, in our group, fear was one of the answers also. So, any other answers to the questions, please?
On the first question, we're not aware of our true nature. So someone said it's more or less like the true self is covered by the material aspects. Very few people contemplate. And in a way, if we read any kind of literature or myth then about slaying dragons, it's all about this specific issue. So we have a long way to go. And we're beginning thinkers. So we're still very much into our instincts.
Thank you.
We said if we do not develop any kind of compassion, or if we have no conscious awareness of compassion, it will not be possible to recognize it elsewhere. Yeah. And we said ignorance, illusion of life, feeling of separateness and selfishness. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Why is compassion so little noticeable in the world? I wrote down that our focus is, for the bigger part, focused on the matter things. And as I understood of Theosophy, it's not our state of evolution yet to be focused on that higher part of ourself. And I thought about the free will too. We are not using it according how we should do it. So.
But does that mean that we are not able to act compassionately?
We are, but I think we don't recognize. We don't have the. Is discrimination the word of onderscheidingsvermogen? Yeah. So.
We're still learning.
We're still learning, yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Any other answers?
Well, one thought. Sorry.
No, it's go ahead, Hank.
Yeah. One thought that occurred to me, and is that I think that many people have moments of inspiration or intuition, that they feel somehow connected with other people, but somehow we are not so familiar with our higher self, and somehow we do not keep it as a kind of important direction in our lives. So we have moments of inspiration, but the point is how to remain it inspiring.
Mm-hmm.
In our group discussion, some of the ideas that we came with, first, the problem that we see little conversion or compassion expressed or noticeable because we have a false sense of identification. You know, I'm the physical body. You know, I'm American, I'm white, I'm black, I'm woman, I'm fat. All those, you know, those affect our consciousness, leading then to, bulimia, all other issues. So the problem has to do with a sense of identification that we are the physical body or we are the personality, and fail to realize that we are not the personality. We are actually spiritual beings using the personality of the physical body as a vehicle in which to learn about ourselves. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the critical, false sense of identification. Secondly, as was indicated in the presentation, the essence of the universe is duality, spirit and matter and so on, which of course is a means by which we learn about our true source. But the problem, which was true in all the religious wars and so on, is that we take our own little truth, relative truth, and we make it absolute. When we say absolute truth, which should belong to all, we absolutize the relative. And that we have the whole truth, the rest don't have any truth.
But
and so this creates all kinds of problems, violence and so on. Anyway, those are a few ideas.
Is the essence duality, or is the essence of the universe oneness?
You might say, to have a universe, you have to have duality. That's what it means to have a universe, spirit and matter. And of course, that comes from one source.
Yeah. It manifested
from
itself in duality.
Manifests itself in duality. But we get trapped and identify with duality.
In fact, that's the seventh jewel and the sixth jewel. The seventh jewel says there is oneness, and we are that oneness. We are the boundless. And the sixth jewel, as far as I understand, says there is duality. And which way do you choose? Do you choose for the oneness, or do you choose for yourself? Well, so I think the essence is oneness, and that's important to realize, I think, because we are able to realize that we are interconnected with everything and everybody.
Well, that's the issue. That's the issue. That we have to see beyond duality. Yeah. When we see other people here, we don't see in terms of black and white. We see the underlying unity behind all, and therefore that affects our attitude and how we respond.
Thank you. Well, I think I'm going to give you some clues and some conclusions. It's about 15 minutes, and we heard some nice examples about connectedness. However, I think it's very difficult for all of us, at least for me, to experience the oneness of all that is. It's not easy to experience that. I think one of the most difficult tasks for many people is to get a more or less clear idea of that seventh jewel of wisdom. And we say more or less on purpose, because without any doubt, this seventh jewel is the hardest to grasp. And nobody, not even the most advanced Buddha, can understand it totally. Nevertheless, and that's very important to realize, we all can grasp something. We can understand, at least to some extent, that there is oneness in the universe. And sometimes, and for the most of us that's not very often, we perceive this oneness when we are on a beautiful, quiet beach, or when we are in the mountains or in mysterious woods. We experience something. It looks like if we distance ourselves from our lower self, and we get more in touch with the real being, with our higher self. And then we get a more or less view of the oneness of life. It's almost impossible to translate that experience in words. And talking about the oneness, I think it's only possible in comparisons. All the religions in the world use images to give an idea of that oneness. Buddhists talk about the dewdrop that flows back into the ocean. In fact, the dewdrop never gets lost from the ocean, but it lives in the illusion that it and the ocean were two, but that's an illusion. Christians speak about the kingdom of heaven to express the unity, and the Islam, they are talking about the homecoming of the returning of the soul. But maybe the best comparison, and you see it already here on this sheet, is the banyan tree, the living banyan. It's a tropical tree. It forms branches, as you see on this picture, from which tendrils hang down, which reach the soul, strike into the ground, and become roots. So every being is a part of the tree of life. We are a part of the tree, although we are self-dependent entities with free will, but at the same time we are nothing more than a tendril of that universal tree. And that banyan is a splendid illustration of the fact that in the core of our being we are all one. We are a living tree, one living tree. And subsequently, this image of the banyan shows how the one becomes the many. It shows the process of emanation. There is a source where all beings originate from. All beings, men, gods, animals, plants, atoms, you name it, are rooted in the same source. So everything is related to one another. Brotherhood is a fact in nature. And therefore, brotherhood is no aim. It's not something you have to achieve. It's a fact. We are all parts of the same tree. So the same life flows through me as through you, as through the ants in my garden, as through the most noble gods or Buddhas. We don't need to strive for brotherhood. We have to realize it, to be aware of it. We have to learn to be aware of the fact that we are all one. Now we said that not even the highest Buddha grasps that idea of oneness, that seven jewel, completely. However, a Buddha understands more than a master of wisdom, and a master of wisdom understands more than his chelas, his pupils, and they understand more than common people. What we want to say is that nobody understands this seventh jewel completely, but everybody can comprehend at least something. Take, for instance, the science of ecology. I think April used that example already in the first round of questions. This word ecology is derived from the Greek oikos, that means house. It's the scientific study of interactions among organisms and their environment. Well, Theosophy teaches that the environment is also composed of living beings, maybe undeveloped, but yet living. And when you look at nature from this point of view, then ecology shows clearly that even in the outer and in the more material form, the beings are interrelated. Together they form the house where there is room for everybody. The word economy is also derived from that Greek word oikos, and economy shows us that also human acts and human thoughts are interrelated. A crisis in the USA has its effects in Europe and in Africa and in other continents, and when the stock market in China loses some of its value, it immediately affects the economy in other countries. Economy teaches also another important lesson. If someone, some person of some country, takes more than it actually needs, this harmony is the result that is obvious. Suppose that a part of your body takes more food than it actually needs, then disease will be the result. In the workshop we also talked about compassion and why it is so hard to find in this world. We heard some very good answers, and I think if I summarize all the answers, you may say that we don't realize the oneness of the all beings, so we just notice a view of compassion. That is because of the fact that we live in ignorance. We are not aware of the fact that we are one. We lived in an illusion of separateness. Humans are not bad. It's important to realize that. Even when they act selfishly, they are ignorant, they don't have the knowledge of the underlying unity of all things, and therefore they demand more for themselves than they actually need. And the result is our disharmonious world. And therefore we cannot miss this seventh jewel in our philosophy, because it proves, it shows that selfishness is not natural, compassion is natural. The universe is built on compassion. In the workshop we also talked about those humans who do have this perception of unity. You may call them Buddhas. A Buddha is an awakened human being. The higher parts of his consciousness are fully active. However, there are differences between Buddhas, and that is stated in the sixth jewel, a jewel that is almost as difficult to grasp as the seventh. And you can describe that sixth jewel as the law of duality. Everything in this manifested world has two parts, spirit and matter. But you can describe the jewel better as the Amrita and the Pracheka jhana, or the two different paths. Jhana, Sanskrit word, means path. You can say two different ways to reach the state of perception of the unity of life. The Pracheka jhana is the path you go alone, you go for yourself. You will become a Buddha at the end, a Pracheka Buddha. And a Pracheka Buddha is a very holy, a very noble human being. He has awakened his higher self. He lives in it. Yet, he is a Buddha because he had a kind of longing, a wish, a spiritual wish, a noble desire, but nevertheless a desire. He wanted to withdraw from this materialistic world full of suffering, full of imperfection, and that's why he performs noble acts in order to reach the bliss of nirvana. But when you walk down the Amrita jhana, you don't have any wishes or desires. Amrita means immortality, but you could name these Buddhas also Buddhas of compassion. It's the path of compassion. You don't just act compassionately, you are compassion. When you follow the Amrita jhana, you will become a Buddha as well at the end, but not because you wanted to. The Amrita Buddha don't have any personal desire. He didn't want anything for himself. He identified himself with humanity or with all that lives. He didn't want to grow. He grew because of his compassion, not because he wanted to. He didn't just go spiritually. He identified himself with all living creatures. His only aim was to help and to serve. He grew, therefore, in all directions. His compassion covers more and more, not only his compatriots, but all humans, not only humans, but animals, plants, everything that lives. In a way, you can compare the Amrita and Pratyeka Buddha with individuality and personality. Individuality is a word derived from the Latin individuum, which means undivided, an undivided unity. In Theosophy, we also use the word monad. It's the core of our being. Personality comes from the word persona, which means mask. It's the vehicle through which the real man, the individuality, works. An Amrita pilgrim perceives that he is one with the all. And for that reason, for him, there is no difference between himself and others. The Pratyeka Buddha, on the other hand, is still under the spell of illusion, because he thinks that there is a difference between him and others. And although being spiritually highly evolved, he doesn't perceive that he, as an entity, is just a leaf on the tree of life. He thinks that that leaf can live and exist on its own, even when it fulfills its duty towards others, but he still lives in an illusion. He lives in a kind of mask. The Amrita pilgrim, on the contrary, understands far more the seventh jewel, because he made the principal choice for compassion. Compassion is unity in practice. You aim at the whole. An Amrita pilgrim cannot live and think but for the whole. Knowledge about the sixth jewel is very, very important. Maybe you think that it's far away because we are talking about very noble and very advanced human Buddhas, but the way they developed started from a principle, from a starting point. And that's why one should ask himself, do I want to live for my own happiness, my own bliss, my own growth, or do I want to live for others? Do I want to grow spiritually for my peace of mind, to avoid troubles and problems, and to have a happy and meaningful life. But if you ask yourself questions like this, you don't have a clear idea of the seventh jewel. You don't really grasp the idea of oneness. For if you understand the underlying oneness of all beings, you would never make a distinction between yourself and others. You would never seek for your own salvation. Sometimes we are tired of this unhappy world. We crave for peace of mind and we yearn for beauty. And there are many so-called spiritual organizations who promise all this and much more. We learn to meditate on spiritual thoughts in order to distance ourselves from the outer world. We will even help others. We will perform acts of compassion, but there's always that subtle, selfish motive. The motive to act compassionately is to reach the bliss of a spiritual condition. There are also humans who are always there for others. They don't want to grow spiritually. They don't look for peace for themselves. Their focus is on helping and serving others. They learn and grow also, but only to be better able to help their fellow human beings. Their aim is not growth, but the welfare of others. I give you an example. You are at home studying Theosophy. You are concentrating on a very interesting and spiritual and inspiring book. The telephone is ringing. Actually, you want to go on with your study. What do? Do you answer the phone? It's a simple example. Suppose that you don't answer the phone and go on with your reading. You will build up a characteristic that spirituality is more important for yourself than communication with others, helping others. And so, unconsciously, you enter the Pracheka path and you strive for your own bliss. But can there be bliss just for you? H.P. Blavatsky, the founder of the Theosophical Society, states in the book The Voice of the Silence, can there be bliss when all that lives must suffer? Shalt thou be saved and hear the whole world cry? It's very, very important to focus always on the whole and never aim for individual spiritual rewards. Then you avoid entering the Pracheka path. Then you really understand the seventh jewel and you automatically work for the welfare of other beings. You don't consider that as a sacrifice. It's a normal, it's a natural way of living. It's the way of the Buddhas of compassion. So the seventh jewel is very practical. Knowledge of the self furthers the understanding of connectedness and relationship with others. You will realize that you are the other, which makes compassion the most natural thing in life. You are fit to use the other jewels such as reincarnation and karma to help others, to show others the path, to work for the realization of Buddhahood. Of course, you make mistakes. Of course, you have to make choices. You need wisdom. You ask yourself, how can I help my fellow humans the best? Doing this, you may sometimes completely miss the point, but you will learn. And you are now stuck to old personal ideas, so you will learn quickly. you will learn quickly to help your brothers. But you never need to make a principal choice. You have chosen for the whole. So you are always focused for the welfare of everybody. You will be a co-worker of spiritual nature, and as HPB says in the voice of the silence, you will help nature and work on with her, and nature will regard thee as one of their creators and make obeisance. Thank you.